I want to show you how I study colors for landscapes. This has helped me understand color and be able to create my own and get colors without needing to know any color theory. Before we get into studying colors, I just want to do a quick run over on how to make adjustments. So, and I have this hue, saturation, and brightness are the three different sliders that I'm going to be using. The first one, the hue. That is the base color, what our color will be working with. And we'll make adjustments from there. But sometimes colors follow in a variety of hues, which is what the base color is. And then saturation. Saturation is basically how intense. Brightness, it's pretty self-explanatory. And a lot of people call this as value. And this can be any color. And in my example, I'll show you how I use this slider to study color. But that's how you navigate that slider to start with. So now, without further ado, let's do the study. When I'm doing my studies, or at least when I'm trying to study color, I have a reference of colors I want to capture. Using this one is a simple example, but I will do more examples if I need to. So, when I start my study, I start by putting in my best guess for where I think the color is. Usually, it's wrong, but I try and get it as close as I can get it. Just do like a quick pass through so I can rough in where all these big shapes are. Generally, things are a little lighter in the sky towards the bottom. And darker towards the top, because that's kind of how the atmosphere is when you look at it. But I'm not going to go into all the details. We're just trying to capture what's in front of us. So usually the sky has some sort of gradient to it. Alright, I got the ground, the sky. Now I want to put in these mountains, which is part of the ground. Guessing this is kind of a grayish color. Kind of paint over just a little bit. I have the opacity set to 80% currently for the brush, but it does not matter in this early stage. Okay, now I kind of have somewhat of an idea where things are. Okay, so that's on a separate layer. So I'm kind of, mostly I'm just trying to get the color roughly in the ballpark, get the shapes kind of where I want them to. That's more important to start with. Getting your shapes, and then as long as your values are accurate, your colors aren't as important. But we're trying to capture colors, so we will see what we can do here. Alright, so the clouds I didn't paint in yet, but I'm going to go in and paint them in. They're not completely white. It's more gray than anything. But close to, because there's variance in the, even in the clouds, like there's a bunch of variance. There's it gets darker in some sections and lighter in others. So there's some blue kind of at the bottom down here that's not as dark. But still, I think it's a little darker than the sky, but I'm not certain. But yeah, this sky is way too dark. Get the big shapes in, kind of figure out where the value range is. Which I might cover that in a whole nother video. Could probably afford to slow down a little bit. Kind of talk as I go. Alright, this is kind of not very bright. I think it's green, but it's actually more bluish looking. So just kind of getting my best guess as I go. And sometimes you get rusty at studies, sometimes I do. But it usually only takes 1 or 2 studies to get kind of out of that rut. Even then, if you just keep working at it, your memory on your skills that you used before will come up. It's all part of the practice. Alright, so I got my base colors of what my best guess were. They do look completely off to me, but let's check this grass, for example. We'll see how close I am. Actually, I want to make this full opacity so I don't. I'm actually not too bad, but if I go color pick and I go across here, this color kind of, if you look at the bar, it's fluctuating all over the place. So this value range kind of, can you hit kind of down here, but can kind of go up here. The color, interesting, it's kind of staying in this orangish range, which is kind of the color that the grass is. But there's also, it moves around a bit. So that's where a lot of beginners might get stumped. Is they'll be like, oh, I painted this color, and actually it's a whole bunch of different colors. So it's hard to get it completely accurate. But if you stay in that range and make slight adjustments, let's see, we can kind of see a slight darker variation, which leans more towards the yellow, so it looks kind of green in comparison. It's a little darker, a little more gray. But even this, you do not have to be exactly. Just kind of roughly in that range. And this lets you kind of learn how to create colors from scratch, but you're also using a reference to kind of as a starting point to see where to go from there. And eventually you do enough of these, you just kind of intuitively know what colors to use. And I'm not going to be finishing this study, I'm just going to be showing how to kind of work through each segment. Okay, now the next thing I want to work on is the sky. It seems a little bit streaky for my taste. And then also, remember, happy accidents. Like Bob Ross always said, no mistakes, happy accidents. I'd say sometimes there are mistakes. But as you're learning, experiment, try things. Maybe try and get it close to what you're going for, because that's the point of a study. It's to learn, get the knowledge. It doesn't have to be perfect either. And that's kind of a toxic thing that you kind of pick up from school and stuff. Is like, has to be perfect, but not for everything. Some things it's important. It's not like we're performing surgery here. Obviously, you're going to improve over time, and you need those skills to be hired for something. But when you're learning, you shouldn't be worried about making mistakes. You should embrace making mistakes, because that's where majority of the learning comes from. So as I get these clouds painted in, something to note is clouds tend to be closer in their value range. You can see there's some variation, like there's a dark spot here and a light spot here. And just painting over next to the section you're trying to capture is a good way to check. I'm going to try and show most of this process, but I'll probably cut some things just to make the video flow a little better. Okay, so right here, I'm not quite getting the shape I want as a replica, but it is close. And you can get even closer by just spending more time reevaluating. But when you're doing a study, you want to, for this color study in particular, for doing color studies, you don't need to be accurate on the shapes. Long as they're in the right value range, roughly the same spot, but we're focusing on just the color. And I think this is coming along pretty well. I definitely can tell these mountains in the foreground are not as vibrant as you would think. They're a lot darker, and they're kind of in this yellowy green range. Well, that's my guess. I'm probably way off. Alright, let's see how close I am. Okay, it's not too bad. It's definitely way darker than what we had originally. I think there's a little bit of blue up in this mountain peak. Remember, we gotta keep in mind that color variance. That is just something you need to know about color. And I didn't learn this immediately. The color variance is a huge deal to making things look realistic or believable. It gives it life. And some things are darker than others because the light is not as direct on it. It's kind of towards the blue-green, and I've been going towards towards the yellow and brown, but I want to go more towards the blue, so it's kind of more over here. Then the highlights just look kind of weird right there. It's kind of looking like it gets a little lighter the further back it goes, because there's more atmosphere you're looking through. So what I'm going to do here, turn the opacity down, and do some big strokes, like turn it down to like 20%, just some light strokes on here. And that will lighten it, pushing it further back. Back to full. Now I'll select what I have there and see where I can take it from there. But it kind of has a shift in color right here. Kind of almost has a gradient effect to it as well. Alright, now I want to figure out where this lighter color is. So I'm going to zoom in. It kind of goes from, this is interesting, so there's a huge color range right in here. It kind of goes to like the far end, towards the yellow end of the green, and then it goes into some of these deep blues. So I was right somewhat, but there is a bunch of different color in there, even though it kind of just looks like one. It's that variation. It's a huge deal. I think here I got the colors most of the way. So you could turn the opacity down when you're just trying to add some color variation. Turn it down to like 80%. Okay, and then something here on this side is it's gonna get darker the closer we get. Definitely blue over here. And it's gonna get lighter the further away we go from, the further in the distance we look. It's not changing a ton, so it definitely seems more blue. Alright, there we have it. There is a quick color study. It may take you longer to get to this point than it took me. It took me about, so it's like 25 minutes for me at this point, and I'll see where else I go from here. There's like an infinite number of things you can do. So it's really up to you when you want to stop the study. And that's how my study came out. I spent probably another hour working on it. The colors aren't exactly the same, which is okay. And sometimes that's good because you kind of have your twist on it. But you're trying to be as accurate as possible and get close. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be close enough to say, hey, yeah, I can recognize that. It's very similar to what I have. And until next time, Dartagon out.